This podcast is brought to you by Ziva, Functional Training Institute's exclusive equipment partner. Engineered for purpose and performance, Ziva's elite equipment supports every rep, every move, and every goal. It's Coach Tarek, your host of the Purpose Driven Movement podcast. On this incredible session, I had Dr. Lou Atkinson and Jennifer Halsall from The Collective, a group of exercise, wellness, and healthcare professionals whose mission it is to really change the landscape of how we see true health. Regenerative health was one of the topics that we discussed, amongst other things. The core focus being on understanding the GLP-1 users or consumers, and really how from a physical activity and regenerative health perspective, what kind of guidelines and understanding, if not building a framework to ensure that whether you're a professional coach or trainer, that you can understand the benefits of training GLP-1 consumers and the incredible opportunity that there is out there to attend to those. So stay tuned for this most amazing podcast. Check out the Functional Training Institute's latest offer, which is 15% off of any of our online training courses. Simply go to functionaltraininginstitute.com and input PDM15 at cart checkout. Welcome, Jennifer and Lou, to the show.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you guys, and appreciate you the time that you're making to share on the topic relating to GLP-1 consumers, and the topic aptly named is Beyond Prescription. So we look forward to diving into that with some detail. But first, who and what is the Collective, and what is your mission and all of those good things?
Well, so I'll take that one. So thanks, Tarek, for having us. And we're really, really excited to talk more about the GLP-1 consumer, the GLP-1 person. And this is, for us, a bit of the core reason why the Collective exists. So we're a team of 5. We come from, as we just mentioned before the podcast started, we come from different parts of the world, and we have different areas of specialization. But if you look at us as a Venn diagram, we all intersect in the health crisis that is affecting our world right now. So we all have a background that brings us together in wanting to make the world a healthier place. So our business really serves the companies that are doing that. So physical activity, regenerative health, we're going to dive into what that means later. Longevity, fitness, physical activity, a bit of public health. Our backgrounds are in all of those areas, health tech as well, so that, these companies are trying to serve the same people, but they tend to work in silos and look at their services through a straw. And we really see the opportunity in connecting the dots, bringing those companies together, connecting those companies and finding ways to work with them to serve the people in a greater way so that better solutions are created to serve better people, to make a better impact. That's basically the reason that we're coming together, because we see that our complementary skill sets are bringing together different pieces of the puzzle that can actually move the needle on making the world a healthier place. And at the same time, we're a team of consultants, and we believe in disrupting the way that consultancy is really thought about. We work together like a relay team. We tag in and out skill sets within our core team and also within our network. And we really focus on working with companies that align with our values from an impact standpoint, that are really here to make their mark on the world and make a dent in the universe. So that's fundamentally what drives us. And you can check us out at www.wearethecollective.world for more information.
Most definitely. We'll have that in the show notes, of course, and your bios and so forth, as well as the GLP-1 paper, which we'll talk about, the white paper. Good. That's excellent. And before we sort of dive into this topic, that notion of regenerative health, perhaps I thought it a good idea to define that, as well as GLP-1. So who's wanting to define that for us here?
Well, I mean, regenerative health is just one of those tags or categories that has popped up recently. And I think it kind of falls in the umbrella of longevity, like preventative health, maybe as well. It's like a category of companies and services that are trying to help people get healthier, maybe outside of the traditional healthcare, sick care area, but that it's way more proactive. And then you see a lot of the DNA testing and supplementation and some science-based, some not science-based, and progressively more and more companies seem to be clustering under this new heading. But I think that there's a lot of terms that are popping up right now that are lacking definition and actually confusing consumers and possibly confusing businesses and people participating in it. So I think for me, it falls under that area. I'd be curious how Lou defines it to see if there's already a divergence, but it's interesting times.
Yeah, so, I agree with everything you've said, obviously, Jennifer, because we are in a new world. We have a lot of emerging therapeutics and a lot of emerging treatments. And, I think we do need terms to differentiate between different options that people have. And, and I think GLP-1s is a good example, right? So GLP-1s are glucagon-like peptide 1 is what the acronym means. And that's just a hormone that our bodies naturally produce that play a role in regulating blood sugar and appetite and our digestive processes. But we're talking about GLP-1 agonist medications. So these are, the brand names that you will have heard of: Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, originally used for type 2 diabetes and actually have been used for diabetic patients for a long time, but only recently have the clinical trials been published to show the effect for people who are living with obesity who don't necessarily have diabetes, although often they will have both of those conditions. And we've seen some really astounding results from those clinical trials in terms of not just weight loss. Weight loss is great. If people are living with extra weight, we know that that's associated with much increased risk of very serious health conditions. But actually what we see with these new medications is that the effects go far beyond weight loss. So, we see improved blood sugar control, improved blood pressure. We see effect on other diseases like kidney disease. And even now we're looking at potential effects on Alzheimer's and the development of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. And so when we talk about something like regenerative health, these are drugs which actually do have almost a regenerative effect. And we still have a lot of research to do. We don't unnecessarily understand all the mechanisms yet, but they can reverse the tide of ill health that Jen was talking about in terms of why we all work together in a way that hasn't been seen before. So it goes beyond the prescription, hence the name of our white paper and this podcast, but it also goes way beyond weight and weight management.
And it seems it's a catalyst for lifestyle change. And beyond the consumption of that, maybe Jennifer, you can answer to this. How does physical activity tie into this? And certainly what Lou just shared.
I mean, I think the powerful thing about GLP-1s is that they're proving very effective in weight loss. However, all weight is not equal. What we're hoping for people who are struggling with obesity is that they get fat loss. And the weight that is being lost can also include like a significant amount of lean tissue. What you don't want is losing your muscle to hit a number on the scale. So to really get the full benefits of GLP-1, there needs to be a combined prescription with, strength training, physical activity, plus the GLP-1. That's the, missing link in this whole story for many people who are enjoying really great benefits on GLP-1s. They're not taking the extra step to get the extra, protection of not losing their lean mass, which is really going to protect them and their health as they continue on their journey.
And if I can just add to that as well, I think it's really important, again, to note that we need a lot more research to understand exactly how physical activity and particularly resistance training works together with the drugs. there's been, to my mind, a failure of the pharma companies who commissioned these original clinical trials, where they were not measuring any behavior change or any physical activity or dietary behavior. So every participant in the trial was given physical activity and dietary support and given guidance on what to do, but we have no evidence of whether they changed their behavior or not. So we don't know at all how these behaviors interact with the mechanism of the drugs. And there are some really brilliant researchers working on this topic, like Renee Rogers over in the US, who are doing that research, and we will have that evidence soon. But in the meantime, I think, again, we have a really great opportunity within the physical activity sector to start gathering those data, and start providing support for people who are using GLP-1s so they can get the benefits of the lifestyle change as well as the drugs. And I think we're going to dive into a little bit later in terms of strategies and support and what individuals will benefit from a little bit later.
Most definitely. And yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lou. There's evidently a gap in the research and therefore an opportunity, and hence the creation of the white paper that you created. Could you talk a little bit more about that, and that being maybe a useful catalyst for perhaps those opportunities to embark on meaningful research to link physical activity with GLP-1?
Yeah, so what we wanted to achieve with the white paper was, first and foremost, to boil down what we know already into something that is easy to understand. So in terms of my career, I've spent a lot of my career basically doing that, gathering the evidence, creating the evidence as well, but trying to communicate that in a way that's easy to implement change. So that's really the overarching purpose of the paper, was anyone who's working in the fitness and health sector that isn't a medic and isn't directly involved in obesity management or management of chronic conditions that would be familiar with these drugs, to understand that there are an increasing number of consumers out there who are going to interact with your products and services who are users of these drugs. So we wanted to give some really practical strategies for what does that mean for that consumer? What are they going to be looking for in terms of additional support and complementary services, and how to do it the right way rather than the wrong way? Because there's a huge stigma attached to obesity and to weight in general. And so currently a lot of people who are using these drugs are effectively doing so in secret because they have a level of internalized guilt around that, which they don't need to have, because obesity is a really complex condition. It's not the fault of any individual for developing obesity or other lifestyle related conditions. It's the environment and the societies that we live in that create that. But that stigma exists, and we need to understand that. We need to work with that until we reach a place within society where, and I think this will happen in a fairly short space of time, where these drugs are a very normal part of our health care and our protective health as we go through our lives. Because if the evidence continues to accumulate, I think we'll see more people using these drugs either in the long term or in the short term than people who are not using them, because the effects are so great and have the potential to help people live healthier lives. So we wanted to capture this moment with the white paper and, as I said, provide some really practical advice and some strategies, and also to put it out there to say, if you have these consumers interacting with your business and you're not sure what to do with them, we can help you to devise a strategy and to tailor your offering to make sure that you're making it attractive and that it's going to work for those individuals.
Attention fitness professionals worldwide. Idea World, the premier global fitness convention, is coming to California, USA this July 17th to 19th. This is your opportunity to earn up to 20 CEC hours from internationally recognized educators while connecting with the industry's most passionate professionals. The Idea World Fitness and Nutrition Expo runs alongside the convention and is completely free and open to the public, featuring cutting-edge gear, technology and nutrition products from leading global brands. Don't miss this career-defining event. Register now at ideafit.com/world and use code PDM25 for a special discount on full registration. Fantastic. And can we make that white paper available in the show notes?
It's free to all.
Oh, how good. Yeah, I went through it. It's just wonderful. And On that note, you've come up with a statistic that says by 2030, the global GLP-1 market is projected to surpass $100 billion. I'm assuming US, fueled equally by, well, that's euro, I think, by type 2 diabetes and obesity treatment. So that's huge. And my question here is like, who are the consumers and where are they?
They're really everywhere. Lou gave such a phenomenal background around the GLP-1, the consumer, and the fact that there's so much struggle and shame associated with being overweight and obese. But if you look at the statistics, and we've looked at the statistics for a variety of different reports and articles that we've done, I think it's like 80% of adults in North America are overweight. 60% of adults in Western Europe are overweight. Our society is inactive, and it's really easy to get highly processed calories in. Like the abundance of calories and highly processed foods is just overwhelming. And if you think about like the average person and the number of times they have to make a food choice over the course of their day, and how these types of foods are really used to manage stress, to cope in a lot of situations, and are very highly addictive, we've set the stage for people to be overweight. That's just where we are. We've set the stage for people to be inactive and overweight. And because, you're confronted with your willpower constantly, people are losing the battle and feeling terrible about it. This is one reason why the GLP-1s are a great solution for a lot of people, because they take the food noise that is in our society that people are experiencing with, stressing about, and struggling with every day, and it quiets that food noise. And it allows them to create a little space between the trigger and the decision that they're going to make, because they're not so overwhelmed by hunger or insulin spikes. It really is almost a psychological solution, because you give people space to make better decisions and get out of their habitual cycles that put them on the path to be overweight or obese. And because I don't see our society changing and the accessibility to high processed foods and the activity levels all of a sudden boosting, this is going to be an accessible solution for people to start taking control of their health again. And I'm terrible at remembering these statistics out of my head. Like some people can just remember numbers on a dime. I'm not that. But we did just do a LinkedIn post where I talked about the compound annual growth of what we think the fitness sector is going to experience between now and 2030. And that's like 17%. And GLP-1 has a 30% expected growth rate. So the expectation of GLP-1s will essentially be double of what we are expecting to see in the fitness sector. And I think it's just because the stage is set for this to be a viable solution for a lot of people.
And I think to pick up on that, what you mentioned earlier, Tarek, about it can be a trigger or an opportunity for lifestyle change. Again, we have initial emerging evidence and we need to gather more. But having worked in this field for over 20 years, working one-to-one with clients, running group programs, evaluating weight management programs for many years, I can honestly say this is a huge game changer for people. It is a release and a relief from the cravings, the food noise, and the guilt and shame that goes with that, as Jen has said. And what that does is that changes their mindset. It gives them the self-esteem and the self-efficacy to try things that they haven't tried before, or they've tried and failed before. And coming back again to the sort of the fitness and the physical activity sector, this is why it's such an opportunity for everybody to reach a new audience and to get new clients and customers and members you could then retain for the rest of their lives, because they lose a little bit of weight as well, which makes being active more comfortable, feel easier. They've got that boost in confidence, they've got that boost in self-esteem. As their body changes, they're likely to feel, improve their body image, so they're more comfortable in those spaces. But we could do so much more as a sector to welcome people into physical activity in a way that feels less intimidating, that feels less stigmatized. And so we talk in the white paper again about how to create inclusive spaces and the things to consider, because we have a workforce who are predominantly from a very active or sport background. And so we need to think about how the workforce needs to develop empathy for these individuals, to understand how the drugs work and how that combines with programming and nutrition and behavior change support. But it is a huge opportunity to reach a whole group of people who previously would never have entered through your doors or engaged with your digital offerings. So, we're really excited about how we can leverage these changes that these individuals are experiencing, because when the drugs come to an end, and they do come to an end for some people, either because they're self-funding and they can't afford them anymore, or because they feel that they've achieved their goal and they don't want the expense or the side effects anymore, or because access is just not possible through their healthcare provider, then the food noise returns, and then they need really, really to be supported through the next phase, the sort of deprescription and maintenance phase. Otherwise, we will end up with weight cycling in the same way that we do with, diet-based weight loss programs.
So suffice to say that the coaches out there's a real opportunity for coaches, trainers to really work in with these GLP users that will be their clients, and to really be the guide by their side, because as you're alluding to there, Lou, it's inculcating habits which could take perhaps a year or many months, a year or more. There's obviously conjecture around that idea of habit formation. That's a powerful point. And one other point I do want to say is we're having an awareness discussion here. So obviously it's not about being prescriptive for those listeners thinking, okay, are they pushing something? Not at all. This is a raising an awareness. And I'm deeply fascinated by this, as I hope the listeners are as well. That brings me to my next question, Lou, for you, which is, what are the challenges for the individual on the GLP-1 treatment journey? And perhaps an extension of that is, what should fitness and preventative healthcare providers avoid doing in order to reach this group?
Yeah, let's delve into those particular challenges, because they are really interesting. And again, they're a challenge and an opportunity simultaneously. So the biggest challenge for most people, and we have, again, accumulating evidence for this, is sticking with the drugs. So to get the benefits, you need to stay on the drugs for a significant amount of time. The clinical trials, generally the treatment is at least a year. And out in the real world studies, which are slowly coming forth, what we see is quite poor adherence, generally speaking. So, some people drop off them completely. Some people just don't quite take them as prescribed, but that's mostly due to the side effects. So certainly during the initial phase, so for the first few months, really, people will experience often some quite significant side effects in terms of nausea, in terms of, gastrointestinal discomfort, which sort of sounds a bit, but actually can be really challenging on a daily basis to be living with levels of discomfort and pain sometimes. And with that nausea, and figuring out which foods work with those side effects can be quite challenging. And all of those things mean that some people just can't continue with it, so they drop out. So that's the biggest challenge, first and foremost, is helping someone through particularly that initial phase, because with most of these drugs, there's an upwards titration. So you're increasing the dose over the first few months. And each time you increase the dose, the side effects get worse, but they will generally stabilize. So we need a lot of support to help someone stick with it as they go through that. So I think underestimating the side effects is the first thing to avoid, and to be really empathetic towards that, and to help with things like finding foods that work for them, that don't make them feel nauseous, that don't give them stomach cramps, but also are nutritious. Because what we tend to see is, because of those side effects, people start grabbing quite simple foods. I mean, in some people, they're really reaching for the more healthful foods. So they're avoiding the ultra processed foods because they are exacerbating the side effects. But we can have some nutrient deficiencies because people are going for something that's sort of simple. So they might be lacking protein, which of course is hugely important for maintaining muscle mass. And they might also be lacking some key micronutrients because they might be missing particular food groups. So lots of nutrition support and lots of empathy and psychological support to help get through that initial part. Then there is, as we've touched on already, the stigma that goes with carrying extra weight or using a pharmaceutical treatment for for a primary condition of weight management. And so we need to work as a sector and as a society to overcome that stigma. I think we've delved into that quite a lot as well. But that comes down to, again, be mindful of how you present yourself as a professional and as a business. We see in the fitness sector repeatedly images of young, lean, athletic looking people wearing very limited clothing, and looking very happy and enjoying their exercise, and that isn't the reality for the vast majority of the population. They don't look like that and they don't feel like that when they're exercising. They don't dress like that when they're exercising. So to create a space where people feel comfortable, we need to think about that. We need to think about the messages we put out as well. And the old adage of no pain, no gain doesn't work for someone who's carrying an extra, 100 kilos and everything hurts all the time, and exercise hurts more. So associating exercise with pain is a real way to turn people off. And similarly, putting messages out there about, beach bodies and being summer ready and these kinds of things. Yeah, these are not helpful messages at all. So these are sort of common mistakes to avoid. And then it really comes into the challenge is preparing for deprescription and leveraging the time they're on the drugs to help establish lifestyles that they can maintain going forwards, and understanding that things like that food noise and those cravings are likely to return once they come off the drugs. And, we see this even with bariatric surgery. Bariatric surgery, basically, and GLP-1 treatments achieve the same thing. They achieve, significant weight loss. The difference with the drugs is there's none of the risks associated with surgery, and it's not permanently changing your anatomy. But the results are the same. With bariatric surgery, we see the same thing. If somebody hasn't gone through the process of establishing how to live a different life after the surgery, they won't get the results. And that's where we get problems with, post-surgery problems and people regaining weight or not losing the amount of weight they could gain. So this isn't a new challenge. It's just that it's now something that's way more accessible for people. So we're seeing it on a greater scale. And as a behavioral scientist, we have great evidence-based strategies that we know can help to change those psychosocial determinants of someone's eating behavior and activity behavior. So we really want to encourage everyone to understand the determinants of behavior. And these are multifaceted, but we can measure them and we can link specific behavior change techniques and strategies to those determinants to make sure that someone has the best chance of success. And that's things like looking at the underlying emotions, looking at their past behaviors, their past beliefs, the way that they've interacted with food and physical activity in the past, and maybe unpicking some of that. So yeah, I think those are for me, the three key challenges. And don't underestimate the effect of the drugs and therefore what is likely to happen when the drugs disappear.
Is there enough to discuss like the weaning off the drugs phase? So, for potential coaches and trainers out there to be aware of at this point in time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is, as anything that's new and exciting, there is already abuse of these drugs. There are people using them who don't need to use them for health reasons. There are people who are microdosing with them. So rather than, again, taking them as prescribed, they're using them as a quick way to drop a dress size or these kinds of things. So I think that's also something for coaches to be really aware of. But yeah, I think fundamentally we're starting to see some people are already cycling with the drugs. So they reach their goal, they come off the drugs, they regain weight, their metabolic markers go backwards, having improved greatly, and they go back on the drugs. And that might be the right option for some people. Ultimately, we know that weight cycling has a very detrimental effect on things like muscle mass, bone density, long-term metabolic health. But if the alternative is that they don't take the drugs at all and they continue to develop poor metabolic health, then what's the worst option? But for a lot of people, they do reach a point where they feel that they don't need the effect of the drugs anymore in terms of losing more weight, or, their metabolic health markers are exactly where they should be for long-term health, and they come off the drugs. So we still need to follow up people for a long time. But what we've seen from the clinical trials where they followed people up a year after ending treatment is roughly 2/3 of people regain a significant amount of weight and have a significant deterioration in their metabolic markers. So the coaches definitely have a really big role to play in terms of helping individuals understand that that is likely. It's more likely to happen than not. But again, present that in a way that isn't negative or fearful, because human beings do not respond well to fear-based messages. We tend to go into denial. We don't tend to engage with them. So we need to have positive messages that say, I have strategies that can help you once you come off the drugs, but we need to start them while you're still on the drugs. So we need to start thinking about how you're going to manage your food noise, how you're going to continue to be physically active when you're not seeing changes on the scale. What is it about physical activity that is intrinsically motivating for you? And often that's about finding the type of activity that brings them joy, the types of activities that they want to do for the activity itself. So Jen is a great example. She does aerial hoop. You should check out her Instagram. She's incredible, but that's something that she found later in life and absolutely, brings her huge joy. And, if you say to someone, what's the perfect exercise program? It isn't doing aerial hoop 3 or 4 times a week, but it's her way. And I'm talking about you while you're here, Jen, but it's a great example of, it's something where she wants to go and do it many times a week. And so as coaches, we need to be talking about what is the activity or set of activities that when you're not focused on the scales, when you're not focused on, optimal health, what is the activity you're going to stick with because you love it, you enjoy it. And it might be because it has a social aspect. It might be because it fits into their lifestyle. It might be because it's something they wanted to do when they were 20 or 25 and they couldn't because their weight and their health was holding them back. So now let's go and do street dance in our 50s, Let's find a walking group where we can all, go to the cafe afterwards and have a cup of tea. It's really about trying to, and again, human beings are not good at looking forwards. So we need to engage people in those conversations and say, let's think about what you're going to want to stick with for the rest of your life.
On that note, and I'll let Jennifer probably take on it from here. There will be an add-on. But yeah, you're right, Lou. And I want to reinforce this point that it's not just about being in the gym, to the gymnasium. There are recreational activities, both outdoor, indoor. There's sport as well at a recreational level. And one point I want to make is that adherence needs to track engagement, I think is what your point is. So that adherence over a set period of time could change. Therefore, the activities, the choice of activities, and this is where the coach and the trainer need to be privy to those phases or changes in how that client, who's in this case, a GLP user, responds, whether verbally or non-verbally. So anyways, I'll let you, Jennifer, add on, expand, whatever you like from here on.
Yeah, I think every time I get to get in these conversations and obviously hear Lou talk about it, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. The thing that, I extract out of that, and, I think about with the years that I've worked with many, many fitness professionals, is the key here, the core here is the humanization, is to really understand the individual, to take that moment to unpack who you're working with and really meet them where they are. Because if one of the things that really jumped out from the paper for me was a lot of the testimonials of the people on GLP-1s. And some of the things that they said, and we did this in pull quotes so that you can just really easily scan, is the shift for a lot of people and the willingness to take action that they hadn't been willing to do before was rooted in their self-worth. And their self-worth had been so affected by their physical state, like really feeling like because there was so much shame in their physical self because of their overweight, that they hadn't been willing to make an investment in themselves because they didn't see themselves as worth it. And really understanding that could be the fragile state of some of the people that you'll come across that may be taking this treatment. And being as generous and as open and non-judgmental as possible to give them space to really start leaning into that worth again. Because one of the things that I really hope that I don't see for rec centers, physical activity, any company that's trying to service this group of people, like, don't call your programs GLP-1 fitness. Like, no, really make sure that it's gentle, it's beginner, it's, allowing these people to explore, because they probably haven't. They've probably really compartmentalized this part of themselves. They haven't explored who they are, what they liked, because I'm imagining, they haven't felt the confidence or the safety to do it. So the role of the coach is to really be the guide for the person of that discovery of what you can do now, what you enjoy now, and to walk with them along the path and let them, the customer, the client, to really define what that is without creating too much of a lead, like be the safe companion on the journey for this person. And I think that that's really the role of the coach, because I think these are people that are connecting with their physical body for the first time in a long time. And you can really nurture that, or you can shut it back down. And that's the risk for a lot of these people.
Yeah, and one word that you talked about is exploratory, which I think is powerful. So treat it like a journey, and that journey could be, as you said, Lou, early on, it could be for a very long time, perhaps years. We don't know. So each person's going to be uniquely different in how they respond and adhere and so forth. So some really important insights from both of you and your sharings. Can't believe how fast the time goes when you just fall into a flow state, which I've definitely experienced. Is there anything else either of you would like to add sort of in closing on this? I would have loved to have kept on talking. However, just need to confine it a little bit, but you're always welcome back on at some point. So yeah, is there anything else either of you would like to add that we haven't already?
Yeah. No, I just reflect on a conversation that Lou and I have had with a woman called Sally Ann, who is in our network. And this is a woman who runs a group of weight loss clinics in the northern part of England. And she was so excited when she got the GLP-1 paper, because she has so many and services, like this is her core business. She services people who are on the weight loss journey and are ready to take the next step, but she doesn't have anywhere to send them because her overwhelming feedback, there's massive amount of gym intimidation for a lot of these people who are on their weight loss journey. It's very intimidating. So I think the takeaway message and maybe the call to action that I have for, professionals and companies that are listening to this is get really curious about the GLP-1 customers or people that are on this treatment. I'd even challenge them to connect with people like Sally Ann, who are dedicated to this group of people, to understand what bridge needs to be built to get more people who are on these weight loss medications into some form of physical activity that's going to prevent the muscle loss and give them a good chance to sustain their results and continue to build on the health building blocks in the long term.
Yeah, and I would follow that up absolutely by saying, I will always talk about what evidence we have, what evidence we don't have, and what research is needed. And I think, again, if we can engage with some physical activity providers who want to be at the forefront of the science and the evidence, don't be worried about being the first one to try something. Work with the likes of Sally Ann or, work with other experts, including us, who can help you put something together, test it out, work with figuring out who your consumers are and how they want to engage, what value you can bring. What's your value proposition? What's your uniqueness that you can bring to this space? Because there is a huge commercial opportunity here, but there's also that opportunity to be part of this revolution where we hopefully will be building a healthier society. And there almost is no downside to giving it a try, as long as you're doing it in an evidence-based way and you're doing it in an empathetic, as we said, non-judgmental way, and just saying, look, we want to support people who are on this journey. Let's put together something that we can offer and let's see how it works, because we need to start having that real world data that the big clinical trials are not gathering, so we can understand how lifestyle change and physical activity interact with these drugs in the long term for long-term success.
Wow, very just incredible barnstorming episode. I really appreciate your insights and sharings, Lou and Jennifer. All of this will be accessible in the show notes, the links, etc., that we've referred to, including that white paper and anything else that you'd like to add. You could certainly follow perhaps the collective. What would be the best way to go about it again, Jennifer, to follow you guys?
We're most active on LinkedIn. We do have Instagram, but that's not our primary channel. So if you just look either of us up on LinkedIn, you can also follow our page, and all of the work that we're doing and continue to do will be updated there.
Yeah, so stay tuned for more, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tarek.
If you haven't already, we would be honored if you would consider subscribing and following us on your favorite platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode and you'll be the first to know when new episodes are released. We truly appreciate your support, and we can't wait to continue to grow and connect with you.